Hello and welcome. The purpose of this course is to educate operators and coaches on the essential components necessary for understanding and complying with the athlete address and residency justification requirements for participation in NCAA-certified events. The address used for a prospective student-athlete must comply with the NCAA residency requirements. Each year when an athlete registers or renews their account in the Basketball Certification System, or BBCS, the athlete is asked to enter all addresses where he or she has lived during the year. For each address entered, the athlete must identify the address type that best describes the nature of the address. If the athlete lives with a parent, the athlete should select "with my parents." If the athlete lives on campus at the school he or she attends, the athlete should select "at a boarding school." If the athlete lives with family that is not a parent, a friend, foster family, foreign exchange program host family, etc., the athlete should select "with a host family." If the athlete lives with a court-appointed legal guardian or state agency placement, the athlete should select "with a legal guardian." If none of those options apply, the athlete may select "other," but this option should be reserved for very rare circumstances only. We advise the athlete to choose one of the other options that most closely describes their circumstances. To determine if an athlete is eligible to participate with a team, the official address of the team as entered by the coach in the BBCS is compared to the address or addresses of the athlete. For U.S. teams, only athletes that are in the same state or in an adjoining state to the team address will appear in the BBCS search to add an athlete to the bench. Alaska, Hawaii, and Puerto Rico are not geographically adjoined by any other state or territory, and the NCAA has not designated any exceptions. Therefore, athletes from Alaska, Hawaii, and Puerto Rico are required to play on a team from that state or territory. Boys' teams are limited to 3 athletes from an adjoining state. An unlimited amount of adjoining state athletes can be added at the bench level, but only 3 can be added to an event-specific roster. Out-of-state athletes who meet the requirements to utilize the metro area exception will not be flagged as out-of-state on the bench. Girls' teams are not limited by the number of athletes from an adjoining state. For teams outside the U.S., all athletes must have residency in the same country as the team's address. This requirement is not determined by citizenship, but rather where the athlete resides. As you begin to build your bench in the BBCS, if you encounter trouble searching for or adding an athlete, it may be for one of the following reasons. First, the athlete may have accidentally selected the wrong gender or the wrong state on their BBCS account. If this is true, the athlete will make the necessary edits by logging into their BBCS account and clicking the Eligibility Center link on their Basic Information tab or by contacting ECAG. Second, the address the athlete entered is not in the same or adjoining state as the team address. Third, the athlete has moved to a different state. If the athlete no longer resides in either the same or an adjoining state to the team, you will not be able to add him or her to your bench. Fourth, the athlete's BBCS account is not complete. Athletes must complete all required information on both the basic and school information tabs and acknowledge the receipt of the educational resources before they can be found by a coach. If you are seeing a warning icon next to the athlete's name instead of an add button, then that athlete has not completed all of the steps to activate their profile. If you hover over the icon, a message will appear that indicates what it is that they need to do. You may need to reach out to the athlete in person and tell them to log back into their account and make sure they have done everything the account requires. Once the athlete has fully activated their profile, the Add button will appear and you can proceed in inviting them to your bench. Lastly, the coach may not be searching for the athlete in the correct state. The state for the search defaults to the same state as the team. Make sure when searching for an adjoining state athlete that you change the drop-down selection to the correct state before searching. Once athletes have been added to the bench, the BBCS will identify those athletes who may be in violation of athlete address requirements with a red Requires Justification button on the coach's bench. The coach will be required to submit a justification statement and supporting documentation for all flagged athletes. In some cases, the documentation uploaded by the athlete may be enough and the coach can simply write or type up a response that says, "See documents on athlete's profile," and upload a text document. If the information on the athlete's profile is insufficient, for example, the athlete just uploaded a selfie from their phone, a photo of their team, or the documentation does not prove the address complies with our residency standards, the coach will need to obtain documentation from the athlete's family that validates that the address is compliant and submit that documentation via the red Requires Justification button on the coach's bench. Do not have the athlete or the athlete's parents call or email ECAG about a justification. It is the coach's responsibility to resolve the residency issue, not the athlete's. Even if an input error was made by the athlete during registration that in turn triggered a justification, the coach should explain the error and provide proof of the correct information via the red requires justification button on his or her bench. ECAG will correct the error when the justification is reviewed, but proof is required before a change can be made. If the lived at address date on the athlete's profile shows the athlete has not lived at the address for a minimum of 3 months prior to start of events, the coach will need to upload documentation showing that the athlete's parent has resided in the same state as the team for a minimum of 3 months prior to participating in events. A utility bill, lease or rental agreement, or the athlete's transcript may be sufficient documentation. If the athlete selected that he or she lives with a legal guardian, the coach should upload a copy of the signed court order or state agency placement order granting custody of the athlete to a legal guardian. Temporary guardianship signed by a notary public or power of attorney is not acceptable. If the court order or state agency placement order are not available, a school transcript or report card showing the athlete has attended school in the state for a full academic year would be adequate. For spring events, this must also include evidence of attendance within the first 30 days of school. This can be documented on the transcript or report card, or via an official signed letter from the school. If the athlete is not from the U.S., you must also upload a copy of their I-20 and visa. If the athlete selected lives at a boarding school or lives with a host family in the same locale as the school they are attending, the coach must provide school transcripts or report cards showing the athlete's attendance for a full year. Again, for spring events, this must also include evidence of attendance within the first 30 days of school. The required transcript, report card, or letter from the school signed by a school official, or for non-U.S. athletes, their I-20 or visa may be all that is needed to document this date. A same address or phone number justification will appear if the athlete shares an address or phone number with someone else on the bench who does not have the same last name. This could be a parent or sibling with a different last name, step-parent, another student with the same host family, etc. The coach will need to provide documentation showing the familial relationship. For example, a birth certificate for a parent/child relationship, or a birth certificate and either a marriage certificate, tax return or insurance statement that shows the athlete as dependent for a step-parent, sibling, or step-sibling relationship. Additionally, the coach could instead provide a copy of the athlete's school transcript or report card showing a full academic year of attendance in the same locale as the team's address. All justifications must be submitted prior to the athlete's participation in an NCAA-certified event. If there is a red requires justification button on the coach's bench, the athlete cannot be added to a roster for an event. The coach must submit a justification with documentation before adding the athlete to a roster. After the justification is submitted, the status will change to pending, and the coach will be able to add the athlete to the roster. If ECAG has rendered a decision for a justification, it will be posted in the BBCS on the coach's bench. This communicates whether the athlete may utilize that address to participate with the team, and the decision is visible to the bench coach and all event operators running an event in which the team has a roster to ensure compliance or validate the athlete's eligibility with the team. If denied, a coach may ask the staff to reconsider its decision only if the coach submits new relevant information. Requests with new relevant information are still subject to the timeline requirements of the initial request, and remember that high volume and late submission may impact ECAG's ability to render a new decision prior to the start of the events. The athlete address requirements and documentation of proof flowchart is available to help coaches determine if an athlete's address meets the requirements and what documentation is required to be collected for each address type to prove the athlete's address meets the minimum residency requirement to play with his or her team. When an athlete's circumstances prevent them from meeting the NCAA address requirements to participate with a team, an exception to the residency requirements may be requested. Finally, coaches are responsible for ensuring that the team he or she is coaching is compliant with NCAA team composition and residency requirements. The coach should obtain and maintain documentation from the athlete's family that validates that the athlete is compliant with the minimum standard of residency requirements prior to allowing the athlete to participate with the team in an NCAA-certified event. Teams who fail to ensure compliance put the certification of the events where it participates at risk, and the team and all coaches associated with the team are subject to penalties. When in doubt, err on the side of caution and provide more information, not less. If you have questions, visit the basketball certification page on ncaa.org for step-by-step guides, forms, event information, and other helpful resources. The coach can also call or email ECAG